Welcome. You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast, the show that cuts through the fog of war and updates you about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
Hello, I'm Marina Yevshan, your host of the Russia-Ukraine War Report podcast, and today is Monday, July the 29th, 2024. It has been 3,835 days since Russia started covert military operations in Crimea, 10 years and 159 days since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, and 2 years and 156 days since Russia expanded its war of aggression. Today's podcast covers the events that happened over the weekend. You may find the Russia-Ukraine war map helpful to visualize the areas discussed. There is a link in the podcast description, and there are map updates. The Russia-Ukraine War Report is compiled by our team from around the world. Today's report includes information from our direct contacts and journalists in Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine morning reports, operational commands north, south and east of Ukraine, open source intelligence, our in-house team of analysts and geospatial experts, and pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian mail bloggers and social media channels with a track record of trying to be accurate. We have one mission, the truth, because the truth matters. Here is my daily assessment. 1. The policy of escalation management implemented by the NATO alliance and the United States, and to a small extent Germany, is a failure. We assess that the risk of serious international incident is increasing due to Moscow's belief that NATO is unlikely to respond. 2. Russian losses of armor, mobility and personnel are unsustainable even for Moscow. 3. The Ministry of Defense of Ukraine remains unsuccessful in de-Sovietizing its field commanders and meeting its obligations to properly train all new troops, resulting in preventable battlefield errors. 4. Russia will continue to make tactical gains during its current offensive, but low troop morale, poor battlefield medicine, corruption and degraded logistics make it highly unlikely that Russian forces will be able to exploit any new breaches in 2024. 5. Continued delays in the delivery of promised military hardware, munitions and funding continue to prevent the Ukrainian armed forces from reaching their full combat potential. 6. We maintain that without a solution to restore air parity that slows the use of Russian glide bombs, Ukrainian troops will continue to be forced to withdraw as Russia destroys every defensible position and location. 7. Russia will continue to commit increasingly worse violations of international humanitarian law until international watchdogs and Ukraine's allies take a unified and firm stance. 8. We maintain the world is caught in the mutually assured destruction instability paradox. 9. Russia's sustained attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, which has destroyed over 80% of its combined thermal and power plant capacity, is a continuation of Russian crimes against humanity that started in October 2022, as outlined in 4 arrest warrants issued by the International Criminal Court. 10. The attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure have incrementally increased the chance of an intentional nuclear accident at multiple nuclear facilities in Ukraine. Russia doesn't stop targeting civilians and civilian infrastructure with glide bombs, drones and missiles. From Friday to Sunday, Russia launched 35 Shahed-136 one-way drones, an Iskander-M short-range ballistic missile, and 3 Kh-59 guided air-to-surface missiles. 31 Shaheds and all 3 Kh-59 missiles were intercepted. During the night of the 26th and the 27th of July, debris from a Shahed-136 hit an industrial facility in Poltava, sparking a fire. No injuries were reported. Russian attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure killed at least 11 and wounded 64. The worst incident was in the Sumy Oblast, where Russian forces shelled Luhansk with Grad rockets in a midday attack. 13 civilians were wounded, including 7 children, and a 14-year-old died after arriving at the hospital. Now for today's action report summary. From Friday to Sunday, Russia carried out 379 assaults, including 128 assaults on Sunday. Through July the 28th, the 7-day moving average for daily attacks dropped to 140, and daily attacks have trended downward since July the 22nd. On Sunday, the VKS, that's the Russian Aerospace Forces, carried out 69 airstrikes, dropping 81 bombs on civilian and military targets. Russia set a new 2024 record for artillery fire, carrying out over 5,200 fire missions with tubed and barrel artillery. Ukrainian forces had an extremely difficult weekend as Russia concentrated its combat potential in an effort to achieve its 2024 operational goals. So, let's talk about what happened on the battlefield. This would be a good time to open up our Russia-Ukraine war map. Ready? Here we go. Starting in the Kharkiv Oblast, we begin in the Liptsi-Vovchansk area of operation, or AO. Fighting continued in Vovchansk with no change in the situation. In Hlyboke, Russian forces were able to consolidate positions in the northeastern part of the village. Based on the new information, the map was updated. Russia destroyed the inoperable civilian radar at Kharkiv International Airport, which has been closed since February the 23rd, 2022. It's unclear why the radar system was targeted. In the Kupiansk AO, Russian forces continued their attacks north of Sinkivka and attempted to advance in the direction of Novoosinovo from occupied Pischane. In the Svatovo AO of the Luhansk Oblast, Russian attempts to advance in the direction of Novosergiyevka were unsuccessful. And in the Crimea AO, Russian forces conducted assaults east of Makiyivka, Nevske and Novosadova. Fighting also continued east of Terny and Torske, where Russian forces made a small advance. The map was updated. Now let's talk about the Donbass and the northeastern part of the Donetsk Oblast. In the Siversk AO, there were Russian assaults on Verkhnyokamyansk from Zolotarivka, Spirne, the direction of Ivanodarivka, and in the area of Pereizne. There was additional clarification on the location of the line of conflict, that's the lock, south of Ivanodarivka, and the map was adjusted. West of Soledar, Russian forces made another attempt to cross the T-513 highway in the direction of Vasyukivka. Russian forces remain on the east side of the Siversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal in the Kostantinivka AO. Russian troops continued their attempts to advance in the direction of Grigorivka and near Bogdanivka without success. A Russian vehicle almost reached the canal in eastern Kalinivka, but was destroyed by a one-way drone. Fighting also continued in the canal district of Chasiv Yar and the forested area near Ivanivska. Russian forces carried out 17 assaults in the Toretsk-New York AO, where Ukrainian forces continued to hold their defensive lines. Fighting was reported in or in the areas of Toretsk, Zalizne, Pivdenne and New York. The VKS continuously bombs New York and Toretsk, with remaining residents lamenting that both settlements will be flattened, quote, like Bakhmut was. In Southwestern Donetsk Oblast, Russian forces carried out 52 assaults in the Pokrovsk AO, where the situation has become critical and shows no signs of improving. Russian forces carried out assaults in the direction of Kolynove and Zelena Pole from Novoalexandrivka, likely in an attempt to spread out Ukrainian resources. Russian commanders continue to send waves of light infantry with minimal armor support in the direction of Vozdvizhenka, Timofeivka, Ivanivka, Vesele, the one southwest of Progress, Sergiyevka and Zhelanne. Russian troops continue to use the railroad grade to advance, and there are limited defensive positions between the deepest part of the ongoing advance and Sergiyevka and Zhelanne. Russian commanders have concentrated their combat power in the direction of Pokrovsk, and Ukrainian commanders report they are outnumbered and defending forces are exhausted. On Saturday, Ukrainian forces withdrew from the village of Vovche and only controlled the western outskirts of Novoselivka-Persha. Fighting for control of Yasnobrodivka continued, and Russian forces remained stuck between Netailov and Karlivka. The situation isn't any better in the Vuhledar area. Russian forces raised their flag in northwestern Krasnogorivka, holding control of 95% of the settlement. Geolocated videos showed that Russian forces were in two areas of Maximilianivka, indicating that military control of Georgievka was established. Based on the new information, the map was adjusted and Georgievka was coded as under Russian control. Fighting continued in the center of Paraskoviivka and southeast of Kostiantynivka, where Russian troops made a small gain. There was additional clarification of the location of the lock and the grey area between Mykilske and Solotke, and the map was adjusted. In the Vremivka AO, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, or GSAFU, reported that attacks near Velika Novosilka and Rozdolne were repulsed. It is still unclear if there has been a new, unreported advance in the area of Novodonetsk. Here's what we know about the situation in the Black Sea and occupied Crimea. The Black Sea Fleet had 1 Kilo-class submarine on patrol, capable of launching up to 4-caliber cruise missiles. During Navy Day celebrations in Russia, Russian state media did not show a single Black Sea Fleet warship that the Ukrainian Navy has claimed to have damaged or sunk. The only two ships shown were the missile corvette Mercury, stationed at Tartus naval base in Syria, and the frigate Admiral Grigorovich. Satellite images confirmed that the July 25th–26th ATACMS attack, previously reported as a drone strike on Sake military airfield in occupied Sevastopol, destroyed a radar and one Su-30M fighter plane. A second Su-30M appeared to be severely damaged by shrapnel. On the same night, a Russian Neba-M radar complex was destroyed northwest of occupied Yarke. Now let's talk about the Russian front. On Friday night, Ukrainian long-range drones attacked Alenia military airfield in the Murmansk Oblast, 1,800 kilometers from the Ukrainian-Russian border. There are multiple reports from Ukrainian and Russian sources that a Tu-22 M3 strategic bomber was heavily damaged. Over the weekend, Ukrainian officials reported a July 24th Special Operations Forces, or SSO, mission carried out by the Main Defense Intelligence Directorate of Ukraine, that's the GUR, at Kryazь military airfield in Samara, Russia, destroyed a Mi-8 helicopter. A July 21st GUR mission in Tamilina, located on the outskirts of Moscow, was also confirmed. A Mi-28 attack helicopter and a Ka-226 utility helicopter at a repair base were destroyed during that action. On Friday, the Russian Ministry of Defense announced that a Su-34 multi-role fighter plane crashed in the Serafimovsky district of the Volgograd Oblast due to a, quote, technical malfunction. The crew was able to eject from the stricken fighter bomber and was recovered. Russian officials later claimed the aircraft was unarmed and on a training mission. On Sunday, Ukrainian drones struck the Russian oil depot in Polivaya, Kursk, setting 3 fuel reservoirs on fire. And at the time the script was written, our analysts geoconfirmed a Ukrainian drone strike on an electrical substation in Glazunovka in the Oryol Oblast. That's all they could tell me.
You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War Podcast. Our team of journalists, researchers, and analysts is funded by readers, listeners, and viewers just like you. To support independent journalism, please consider becoming a patron. You can find us on patreon.com/malcontentnews.
Here is my Theaterwide update. Speaking with Japanese news agency NHK, President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky said that he was working on an action plan to achieve peace in Ukraine by the end of November. Ukrainian forces have been struggling to stop a Russian advance in the direction of Pokrovsk, dealing with continued delays in promised aid, including ammunition and F-16s, and new brigades are still being trained. European leaders and Kyiv are also openly concerned about the United States ending support for Ukraine and withdrawing or placing heavy restrictions on the NATO alliance if Donald Trump returns to the White House in 2025. The Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, plans to make a state visit to Kyiv on August the 23rd. It will be his first visit to Ukraine since Russia expanded its war of aggression. The International Atomic Energy Agency confirmed that one of the reactors at the Yuzhno-Ukrainska nuclear power plant near Mykolaiv shut down due to a transformer failure. A short circuit in the 330 kV switchyard damaged a ceramic insulator, which leaked oil, starting a small fire. The reactor was offline for 17 hours during repairs and returned to full power operation 7 hours later. Russian propagandists attempted to start a rumor that there had been a nuclear accident and that there was a larger fire. Both claims were false. The Ukrainian Seaports Authority reported that since July 2023, over 60 million metric tons of cargo have been exported through Odessa ports, including 40.6 million tons of grain shipped to 46 different countries and territories. On July 17, 2023, Russia unilaterally left the Black Sea Grain Initiative and declared a blockade of Ukrainian ports, which they could not enforce. A year later, the Black Sea Fleet completed its withdrawal from occupied Sevastopol due to the inability of the Russian military to deter drone, uncrewed surface vessel, and missile attacks. The Human Rights and War Crimes section of the Russia-Ukraine War Report podcast sometimes contains graphic descriptions of war crimes, human rights abuses, torture, gender-based violence, and violence against children. Some listeners may find these accounts disturbing. Today's report does not contain any graphic content. 3 wives were able to talk to their husbands for the first time in more than 2 years after they surrendered at Azovstal in Mariupol under an agreement arranged by the United Nations and the International Committee of the Red Cross in 2022. Quote, "That was the first time I'd seen my husband in 26 months, said Maria Alexeyevich, adding, quote, "It was barely a minute, but I realized he still cares about Ukraine and believes he's not forgotten." Russian propagandists secretly recorded the calls and published them on YouTube. The terms of the UN and ICRC arranged surrender included Red Cross supervision of all POWs and a quick exchange back to Ukraine after processing. Almost 1,800 Azovstal and Mariupol defenders remain in Russian captivity, and the Red Cross has never visited any of the prisoners. As a delaying tactic for exchanges, Russia has charged or put on trial over 620 Ukrainian POWs for criminal offenses. Those convicted have received sentences ranging from 10 years in maximum security penal colonies to the death penalty. Now it's time to visit the land of Mobiks, Mobilization and Mir. Russian military forces, including VKS pilots, are suffering a critical water shortage in occupied Ukraine. Russian troops have been restricted to a single 1-liter bottle of potable water a day. Propagandist fighter bomber appealed for donations and was able to send 3,300 liters of drinking water to one military airfield, which only scratched the surface of what was needed. There continue to be reports of Russian troops sickened by cholera and typhoid fever. Russian soldiers with the 384th Regiment released a video showing how they had to make flatbread from stolen chicken feed, since they had not received any rations in almost a month and had exhausted their supplies and looted the region. The number of complaints of Russian channels about food and water shortages exceeds October 2022, indicating that Russian logistics are increasingly degraded. During Russian Navy Day celebrations in St. Petersburg, not in Sevastopol for some reason, a group of sailors in dress uniforms gave autocrat Vladimir Putin a modified Roman salute, better known as the Nazi salute. Instead of an outstretched palm, the hand was held in a fist. No one appears to know why the salute was given, and left even Russians asking what just happened. We link to the video in today's sitrap, and there's a link to it in the podcast description. Al-Qaeda in the Sahel claimed responsibility for the ambush of the Rosgvardia Africa Corps, Malian military and former private military company Wagner Group mercenaries in northern Mali, which left between 60 and 80 troops dead and 10 to 15 captured. It is the worst military defeat for Russia outside of Ukraine since February 2018, when United States forces killed 165 to 400 PMC Wagner mercenaries and Syrian troops at the Battle of Hasham. The last radio communication between the Russian and Malian company was on July the 27th, stating only 3 men were left and they were still fighting. The confirmed dead included Anton Lotos Yelizarov, who led PMC Wagner's siege and capture of Soledar in December 2022 and was a commander during the Battle of Bakhmut, and Sergei Pont-Shevchenko, who was the commander of the failed operation. Also killed was Nikita Belый Fedyanin, the administrator of the former PMC Wagner Telegram channel Grey Zone. Indigenous Tuareg rebels, also known as the CSP-PSD, who are not associated with Al-Qaeda, offered to turn over their Wagnerite prisoners to Ukraine as a show of solidarity. The Russian Rusich group blamed the Russian Ministry of Defense for purging experienced leaders from PMC Wagner out of the Africa Corps and replacing them with less experienced Russian officers who are loyal to the Kremlin. Putin's purge continues. The United Kingdom Defense Intelligence Directorate reported that the head of the Russian Defense Ministry's military construction company, Andrei Belkov, has been arrested on charges of corruption related to procurement activity. The update posted on Twitter, also known as X, said that the company, quote, was set up in 2019 specifically to achieve efficiencies, with then Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu praising the special internal and external audit regime that the company would bring to defense. In reality, it is likely the company has been used to extract rents by corrupt officials. The CEO of the defense company Zvezda Strela, Vladimir Maslinsky, received a 4-year prison sentence for embezzling $4.9 million from 2016 to 2023, quote, by deception and abuse of trust using his official position. 2 others are accused of assisting Maslinsky, the head of the 222nd Military Representative Office of the Russian Ministry of Defense, and the head of the LLC TRC Gorizont, LLC Taganrog Foundry. The pair are accused of embezzling another $3.25 million as part of the scheme. We end today with economic news. On Friday, the Russian Central Bank raised the prime lending rate by 200 basis points to 18% in an attempt to control inflation. Economist and head of the central bank Elvira Nabiulina warned that inflation would rise 1.5 times higher than forecast over the next year, and that Russia is utilizing the full potential of its labor force and industrial capacity. While she used the word, quote, exhausted, many misconstrued this as the Russian economy was approaching collapse. Russia is facing a major labor shortage due to a number of factors. Data shows that COVID-19 caused 680,000 excessive deaths from 2020 to 2022. Since Russia expanded its war of aggression against Ukraine, an estimated 1.2 million men, many educated and skilled, have fled potential mobilization. Russian men in skilled and unskilled trades and certain government branches, such as the Ministry of Internal Affairs and the Ministry of Emergency Situations, are signing contracts with the Ministry of Defense due to salaries that are on average 3 times higher than non-military state enterprises and private businesses. Over 1 million Russians are now in the active duty military, and those killed and severely wounded during the expanded war of aggression in Ukraine have likely reached or exceeded 500,000. Outside economists believe that Nabiullina's actions since March 2022 have likely prevented runaway hyperinflation, and the new threat is stagflation. Nabiullina reported that sanctions and Russia's partial war economy are squeezing the supply of consumer goods. This may start to drive up savings due to appealing interest rates for deposit accounts, unfavorable interest rates for loans, and the shrinking availability of big-ticket items to purchase. For the average Russian, the economic pinch is limited to grocery and petrol prices, which have grown 20 to 60% since May, and higher costs to eat out and travel. The Kremlin has made an ever-growing list of economic data a state secret, making it extremely difficult to analyze the reality of Russia's economy. On the subject of state secrets, industrial output and petrol, the Russian Ministry of Energy reported that during the first 6 months of June, oil production and the amount of refined products created dropped when compared to last year. Oil production fell 3.3%, diesel fuel production dropped 8.1%, and heating oil fell 8%. Petrol production numbers were made a state secret in April 2024. Everything is going to plan. And that's what we know. Your support of my home, Ukraine, helps us make history and protect the future for all.
You've been listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. To help keep us independent, please consider providing financial support by becoming a patron. Want on-demand news in your hand? Download the Google News app and make Malcontent News one of your favorites to receive breaking news updates. Thank you for listening.